Good morning and greetings from the beautiful Treaty 4 territory in Regina, Saskatchewan, where it is pouring, as my father used to say, cats and dogs, from the traditional home of the Nahiawak, Assinipik, Nakota, Lakota First Nations, and the homeland of the Métis. Now, I have the great privilege of leading the University of Regina's Community Engagement Research Center, together with my colleague Irina. I also kind of co-lead the Western Hub of the Canadian Philanthropy Partnership Network. What a great day we had yesterday. We heard so many powerful stories about people and communities coming together to address gaps in mental health service, such creativity, such passion, so many good ideas, so much need. Irina and I are hopeful that everyone who attended yesterday and also today will make at least one new connection or gain some new insight or ideas that you can take into the work you do with community. This morning, we have another amazing lineup of speakers for you, representing different experiences, backgrounds, and entry points to the issue of mental health. We're going to start with some reflections by Dr. Rod Mccormick about Indigenous mental health. The Centre for Addiction and Mental Health has included Dr. McCormick on their leading Canadians for mental health list. He is a much sought after Indigenous mental health teacher and leader, and we are so grateful that he has agreed to join us today to share some of his insight with us, even though he is no doubt emotionally exhausted from helping his community deal with the collective trauma they are experiencing. As you may know, Dr. McCormick lives on his partner's home reserve in Kamloops, and we all know what's happened there and why that has made the national news lately. Kamloops is the home to Thompson River University, which is so fortunate to have him as a professor. Now, Dr. McCormick, we think you will be so happy to meet and hear from Emily Winters, who is a PhD student in psychology at the University of Regina. Emily is originally from Newfoundland and Labrador, and she moved here to do graduate studies. She's working on her PhD right now, and she's going to share some of the highlights from an initiative that she and some of her fellow graduate students have embarked on to counter oppressive practices in mental health services for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The passion of Emily and the students involved in this project they bring to this initiative allows me to be hopeful about the next generation of counseling psychologists and social workers. We'll put a link in the chat at some point this morning to their anti-racism speaker series. Now, Latoya Reed is also one of our speakers, and we're very happy she can join us today from her new community of Toronto. Why do all the good people move away from Saskatchewan? Latoya, we are very unhappy to see you move, but happy to see you enjoying your new life in Toronto. Latoya is a registered social worker and practicing psychotherapist who takes a decolonizing approach to therapy. And I know all of you are probably as excited as I am to hear her thoughts about how philanthropy can be used to support and empower the Black community as an alternative to systemic paternalism. I'm also happy to introduce you to Amal Abdullahi. Amal is also a new mom, so had the privilege of meeting that brand new baby of hers not so long ago. Regina is very fortunate that Amal and her family chose to move here. Her efforts to help newcomers and refugees access mental health resources is inspiring. In light of the horrific act of racialized violence that occurred in London, Ontario this past week, we can all appreciate that the mental health concerns of people in the Muslim community have likely intensified. Thank you, Amal, for agreeing to help us understand some of the lived experience of Muslim Canadians and what needs to be done in this area of mental health. Now, each speaker will have 15 minutes to share their thoughts with us, and then we're going to have an opportunity for people to move into breakout rooms where you can reflect on what you heard for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and have a close off the morning. So I'm going to turn over the microphone right now to Dr. McCormick.
Thank you. Wakeford Whitetech, Rod McCormick, and Bego. My name is Rod McCormick. I'm Ganigahaga, and I'm calling from the unceded territory, traditional territories of the Secwepemc people, and from the community of Kamloops to Secwepemc. And I do apologize for holding everyone up. I'm not good at technology yet, but for some reason, I just couldn't get on today. But I'm on, so great. could you let me know maybe when I only have a minute left? And I'm not only flustered from fighting technology, but I had my second Moderna shot yesterday, and man, it really hits you the second one. Okay, so hopefully this is going to work. Yes, can everyone see that?
Oh,
No? Oh, great.
Kamal,
Share screen. I'm doing it on a Mac because the PC wasn't working. Slideshow. I've clicked slideshow. That's not working. No.
Do you need to make Dr. McCormick a co-host so that
now
he
I'm
can share his
I don't
screen?
see his name. So, oh yeah, here we go. Let me try that.
How's that? Not yet. You are the co-host. I'm sharing screen, but it's not sharing. Ah, okay. I'm not sure what to do.
The other alternative would be to just quickly email it, and then we could show it on your behalf if that would work better.
It's too large. I can read it without the visuals, I guess. Yeah, I don't know what else I can do here.
We could share it as a PDF.
Yeah, my technical advisor, my partner, just took the dog out. So,
Well, no
can I
worries.
just suggest something? Like, are you allowed to share the screen?
I don't know.
Yeah, just see at the bottom, and there is a green arrow share screen. If you click on that,
Well, this is a Mac, so it seems to be totally different. It just gives me the little symbol to share screen.
Well,
Slideshow, slide sorter.
if you can send the the slides to someone else.
It's way too large. I couldn't send it through any system.
well, let's not.
yeah.
We can send it afterwards to.
Yeah,
Like, we plan on
sure.
sending an email to everyone afterwards
Yes.
with copies of all the other presentations that people have shared with us. So if you're
Oh, wait a
okay,
minute.
just
This says share at top here. Share. Hang on. It's gonna upload. No, this wants to upload it to the cloud. Maybe that's how I'll send it to you. I guess I'll just give up because we've wasted enough time. Normally the share screen works. I practiced it on the Mac even, but it's not working for some reason. Okay, well, I'll start by saying, yeah, the first slide was the residential school all lit up. I live not far from the Kamloops Indian Residential School. My partners, all our family attended, and it looks beautiful right now because the city of Kamloops has done this light show with orange, and then one of the local hardware stores donated 215 lanterns, which are put out front on the lawn there. So it's quite pretty, but it's also deceptive. My next slide just, so I thought you guys would be interested in the 215. So some of my slides have to do with that. The next one is Pope voices sorrow over Canadian deaths, doesn't apologize, June 6th. So people are pretty upset about that the church, Catholic Church, probably because of legal liability, will not say that they apologize and they're responsible. So it's a bit frustrating. Similarly, the missionary oblates who ran the Kamloops school won't release the records and won't cooperate, which is pretty frustrating. The next slide, I was talking about the mental health profiles for a sample of BC's Aboriginal survivors of the Canadian Residential School. There's really little research that's been done on this, but just going down the list, you can't see the scale, but major depression was one of the largest mental health diagnoses at 21%. PTSD, 64%. Dysmic disorder, which is sort of a mild, prolonged form of depression, 20%. So it, and substance abuse disorder, 26%. So it has had quite a substantial impact. The First Nation suicide rate is for males, it's approximately 5 times for that it is for non-Aboriginal, non-Indigenous people. And for females, it's 7 times as high. The COVID's been particularly bad. It's sort of exacerbated the rates. So the First Nations Health Authority collected one on overdoses, and it's in 2020 it was up 119%, the increase in toxic drug deaths amongst Indigenous peoples, and that's so COVID I know has been hard on everyone, but it's certainly had its impact on Indigenous peoples as well. So I'm going to go into I had a nice slide here. It said our brains, here's a quote from Ryan North. Our brains are wired for connection, but trauma rewires them for protection. That's why healthy relationships are difficult for wounded people. And I do think that has a lot of significance for Indigenous peoples because the connection is pretty vital. And that's one of the things I'll talk about in my remaining minutes here. So, and I'm sorry, this is an abstract concept, which is better presented visually, but the theoretical explanation that I came up with, this is when I was a doctoral student many years ago. And I just wanted to say, Saskatchewan, you guys really benefited from getting our best dean ever, Irene, who is a former doctoral student of mine and now was our dean. She's Indigenous from the South Pacific, and she's now the provost and vice president of University of Saskatchewan. So we steal a lot from you guys. Sometimes you steal some from us. So the theoretical explanation I wanted to share has to do with logotherapy, or Viktor Frankl. And I just saw the parallel because of the Jewish Holocaust. And what Viktor Frankl, who's a psychiatrist, he survived the extermination camps of Nazi Germany. And he found individuals and cultures can survive if they have a strong reason for living or source of meanings, such as spirituality, work, significant relationships, contributing to your culture, community, etc. And as a means to eradicate Indigenous or Aboriginal culture, the Canadian government systematically moved to disconnect Indigenous peoples of this country from sources of meaning and strength. Whether they did that knowledgeably, I believe they did, it had its impact. So the next slide just shows the individual in the middle, and then it's an expanding circle. So family is the next ring, then community, then culture, then the natural spiritual world. And it's sort of a self-transcendent model versus, say, Maslow, which was based more on Western individualistic culture, which is not self-transcendent. So my next slide, disconnection. So when you think of those circles, we were disconnected from family due to the residential schools. We were dislocated from our communities and relocated to reserves. And this happened mostly for land grab reasons, but as well, there was forced replacement of traditional community leadership with elections imposed by Indian affairs. Cultural practices, so the next ring, were often banned or prohibited. So you had potlatch law, Sundance law, etc. You're punished for speaking your language. They tried to replace traditional spirituality with Christianity. And the last ring, nature, government had a policy to relocate Indigenous peoples to urban settings when they could speed up the assimilation process. So when you think of those disconnections, and if as Frankl, if he's correct, and that's where we get our sense of meaning and strength and so on, we've been disconnected from those. So a lot of my research is focused on people's healing journeys, Indigenous peoples, and how they heal. And it seems to be reconnecting with one or more of those sources of meaning and strength. If I were to look at a meta-analysis of all my research in the last 25, 30 years, I would say that connection or belonging is a big one. Balance, cleansing, empowerment, and responsibility. Those are all, they all seem to lead to healing. Next thing I'll say is, and sorry, I had some really nice slides for this. I'm really looking at healing from the land, and Umbashi is one of the networks I run. It's an Indigenous mentorship network, and I run a summer school called Healing from the Land, which I teach with an elder and a local elder who grew up on the land. And day one, it's a 5-day grad course, and day one is trees and forests. So we're off to the forest, and we share teachings about how we heal from the forest. Day 2 is rivers. Day 3 was lakes and water. Day 4, plants and earth. Day 5, hills and mountains. And I won't read you the quotes from that, but we students learn how nature can be grounding and connecting, how nature can be calming and cleansing, how nature can provide perspective and guidance, and how nature can be empowering. Yeah, I'll skip those because they're essentially, well, I'll read the quotes 5 times. Learning, here's one summer student, learning from a local knowledge keeper was the highlight of the course. He brought valuable insight and meaning into what it really means to heal from the land. In a time of reconciliation, our first step is to heal the self, and through this, we consider all that surrounds us. Mother Earth, Masi, for sharing your wisdom. And nothing is more likely to build true reconciliation and cooperation. Like promoting a shared value, connection, and responsibility for the land that we live on. Healing from the Land course helped to promote this connection and bridge understanding with regards to how nature can support healing as individuals and as a nation. So I'm doing research on these courses because there's a number of them now in Canada, and I'm looking at what works and what doesn't. So my next slide shows actually an Inuit man drawing back the arrow in the bow. And as a segue to the next presenter here, I wanted to mention the teachings. I was up in Iqaluit a couple of years ago presenting at a conference, and I learned about Inuit Kauyima Ya Tukanit. Hopefully I got that right. It's a belief that this collective body of knowledge prepares Inuit for success in the future. And the elders have used the bow and arrow analogy to explain the relevance these teachings have for the future. If you do not draw back the arrow in the bow, it will drop a short distance in front of you. And non-Indigenous people, like government folks, I've explained this using golf as a metaphor. So I believe the backswing is a good metaphor for research as well, as it's a good illustration of the importance of research. Before we can address a problem, we must research what we know, what we need to know, what resources are available to us, and generally to gather the strength needed to move forward. Traditional creation stories tell us that what we needed to know to lead a good life was provided by nature. Research might mean that we need to research or search again for what we once knew. So that the idea of the backswing is we first need to step backwards to develop a greater sense of self-efficacy. So we gather medicines by reviewing past accomplishments, identifying skills and community attributes, relationships, and resources to prepare ourselves to move forward. And I think that's a concept that's a little bit different from many Western ideas, because it's more future oriented. Whereas, anyway, a final slide, because I'm probably down to my last minute. My colleagues, I've had so many emotional faculty meetings, department meetings, and so on online. And people are saying, what can we do to help? And I don't like to be cynical, but for the last 25 years, we've had 13 years of Royal Commissions and national inquiries. And the first one, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, had 440 recommendations. Longest and most expensive Royal Commission ever. Very few of those were ever implemented. The TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 7 years, same cost as RCAP, 94 calls to action. So they didn't call it recommendations. They thought maybe if we call it calls to action, they'll be implemented. And the government's implemented 8 in the last 5.5 years. The latest was the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, 231 individual calls for justice. So they're calling it calls for justice. So if people want to know what they can do to help, there's 700 suggestions from all these royal commissions about what people can do to help. So once again, I apologize for my technical challenges here this morning. I've never had this happen before. And I'll stop because I'm sure I've used up my 15 minutes. Yawa, Kucham.